Hello. So in the last part, audit evidence, then SA 501, specific considerations, selected items, and external confirmation is what we have done. Now this part will deal with analytical procedures and audit sampling. So understand these two topics of analytical procedures and audit sampling are actually a little huge topic. I'll be just revising the important areas of these two topics. Okay, I'm not going to each and every detail because obviously it takes a lot of time. So I'll just go through the important points of these two topics. Rest you can just go through and you will be able to understand. Okay. Now, out of the 7 methods to obtain audit evidence, we understand the seventh method was analytical procedures. So going to the analytical procedures part. Okay. Took a break, had something, had some water or snacks or something. Mostly, I think many of you would have thought, okay, first part is done. It's been too much. I've been sitting for 1 hour, 20 minutes. I'll watch this in the evening, or I'll watch this a little while later. So I think you would have had your lunch also by now. Okay. So, okay, anyways, your wish, but I would suggest don't take a long break. Just continuously, try to take a 15-20 minute break and come back and watch the part two. That is the best thing. Why am I not doing it in a single stretch is because even for me, continuously, recording for 1-2 hours will be not easy. So I also need a small break in between. And even for you, if it is good, if it is in two parts, so if you want to just listen to this, you can go through that later stage. So that is the reason. Anyways, not wasting much of our time, let's go to the discussion on analytical procedures. See, when I say analytical procedures, what you have to understand is basically what is analytical procedures? No, it's a procedure where there is some kind of analysis being done, correct? Some kind of analysis being done. That is why it is called as analytical procedures. So the auditor is basically doing some procedures where there is some analysis that is going to happen. There is some analysis. Okay, there's some analysis. Now, what is he analyzing? What is he actually auditing? He is auditing financial statements. So he has financial information with him. Now he needs to audit the financial information, and for that auditing that financial information, he is going to analyze that financial information by using what? How he can analyze the current financial information that he has with you. For example, now let me ask you, you write an exam, you get a result. Now you want to analyze your result. Okay, you get the result. Now you want to analyze your results. How do you analyze your results? Either you, if you have already written previously, you take the previous attempt marks and compare with the marks of the current attempt. Or you can, what you can do, you can basically take the marks of another student and compare with your marks. So you can analyze your information by using some other information. That is how you analyze, right? So basically here also auditor wants to analyze financial information, and for that analysis purpose he will use either other financial informations, or he will use non-financial information. And by using financial and non-financial information, he will be able to understand the relationships, the probable relationships among the financial and non-financial data and with the financial information in the financial statements. Do you understand? For example, now we have the current year financial statements with us. Now we can use the previous year financial statements and compare it with the current year. We can use the previous year financial statements and compare it with what? With the current year. Okay, compare it with the current year. I was just sitting, so I thought I'll just stand up and yeah. So compare it with the current year. So basically, this is what analytical procedures is all about. It's about analysis of data that you have with some other information, by which you are able to get some you reach some kind of a conclusion or some kind of an evidence, which will help you to understand how other procedures needs to be performed. You understand? Here the definition is there. Let's go through. Analytical procedures means evaluations of financial information. So you're evaluating financial information. Okay, this is actually your chapter number 8. Chapter number 8 in your textbook. Okay, so it is evaluation of financial information through analysis of plausible relationship. Plausible means probable relationship among both financial and non-financial data. That means you use financial data or non-financial data and you try to analyze it, evaluate, you try to analyze it by comparing or by using it with the financial information which you have, that is the current year financial statements, and try to evaluate that financial information by understand the relationship of that financial information with the other financial information or other financial data. For example, imagine your financial data that you have is salary of the current year. Now you can compare the salary of the current year with the number of employees, that is a non-financial data in the entity. Now when you compare the financial information that you have with the non-financial data, that is number of employees, imagine 100 employees, total salary is this much, so you know, okay, this is reasonable. So this is basically an analytical procedure. You compare the salary of the current year with the salary of the previous year, see the deviation. These are analytical procedure where you're trying to understand the relationship among the financial data and the financial information to evaluate the financial information. Okay, that is basically called as analytical procedure. They're saying analytical procedures also encompass such investigation as is necessary for identified fluctuations or relationships that are inconsistent with other relevant information or differ from the expected values by a significant amount. Now, when you imagine, now you're comparing the current year with the previous year. Now you have an expectation in your mind that the difference or the current year, if the salary is 2 lakhs, imagine the previous year is imagine 1 lakh 50,000. So you know, if the previous year 1 lakh 50,000, current year might increase by another 50,000 or maximum by 75,000. Now you look at the value, your expectation was increased by 50 or 75 and the current year figure is 2 lakhs. So it has been increased by how much? 50,000. Now it is within your expectation. You understand? So when you have an expectation with you, okay, whatever analysis that you do, you might identify certain fluctuations or relationships which might not be similar to what you have expected, or which might not be similar to some other information that you have. Now in that case you might consider what, investigating that particular transaction a little more deeply. Why? Because it might contain some misstatements. Okay, so when you expected that the salary will increase by 50 to 75 only, and you see the salary has increased by 2 lakhs. Imagine previous year was 1 lakh 50,000, current year is some 3 lakh 50,000. You thought it will be maximum 2 lakh or 2 lakh 25,000. Now you understand there is a great deviation. There's a great difference on what you expected and what is the actual fluctuation that you have found out. Now when you feel the fluctuation is too high, you might want to what, investigate it and to understand why such a deviation has come. Now this is basically what is discussed in which procedure? Analytical procedure. Do you understand? So there's a definition given here, please learn it. Analytical procedure means evaluation of financial information through analysis of plausible relationship among both financial and non-financial data. Analytical procedures also encompass such investigation as is necessary of identified fluctuations or relationship that are inconsistent with other relevant information or differ from the expected values by a significant amount. Have you heard about ratio analysis? Now, ratio analysis, what you're doing, you are analyzing the numerator and denominator by finding out a ratio by using that numerator denominator, correct? In current ratio, what do? You take current asset, you take current liability, you find out the current ratio. Now you are using current asset, you are using current liability, trying to make a ratio out of it. And once you get the ratio, you have a standard ratio, which is your expected ratio. Now you see what ratio you have got and what is the expected ratio. If you feel the fluctuation is too high, if you feel there is a huge deviation, you will investigate why there is a huge deviation in the current ratio. Now, this is what is called as analytical procedure. This is what is called as what? Analytical procedure. Learn the definition. Do remember what I told you. Write this definition somewhere else and keep, so that you will be able to read it whenever you want. Okay. Now this is basically an analytical procedure. See here. 2015-16 turnover was 2.8, 16-17 is 2.9. Gross margin, this is the difference. So this is basically called as analytical procedures, where you are analyzing data by comparison. Now, what is the purpose of analytical procedure? They're saying the purpose of analytical procedure, one is to obtain audit evidence. Second, it is to help the auditor in forming an overall conclusion. These are the two purpose. Okay, one is to obtain proper audit evidence, relevant and reliable. Relevant and reliable means proper quality audit evidence. So one analytical procedures helps you to have good quality audit evidence. Okay, and second, now what is the substantive analytical procedures that I teach you when I discuss the next revision lecture. Substantive analytical procedure is basically trying, see, you know that just to give you a small idea, audit procedures, or we'll do it now itself. No, in audit evidence, they have given you that diagram very neatly about audit procedures. We'll go there. Why do you have to keep it next time? We'll do it now. Audit procedures. See, this is basically audit procedures. Audit procedures. See, audit procedures are one risk assessment procedure. Then you have other procedures. In other procedures, you have test of controls and substantive procedure. In test of substantive procedure, you have test of details and analytical procedures. Now, this is called as the analytical procedures within what? Substantive procedure. This is substantive analytical procedure. Substantive procedure, analytical procedure. This is substantive analytical procedure. Basically, audit procedures are two. One is risk assessment procedure and other audit procedures, or it is called as further audit procedures. In further audit procedures, you have test of controls and substantive procedure. Substantive procedures are test of details and analytical procedures. Now, this analytical procedure is substantive analytical procedure because it's an analytical procedure within substantive procedure. Okay, so in total audit, you are doing two procedures. One, you start with risk assessment procedure, then you go for the other procedures. In other procedures, you want to perform test of controls and substantive procedure. Okay, substantive procedure, you're doing test of details and analytical procedures. Test of details is your vouching verification. Test of details, you're testing in detail, that is vouching and verification. Analytical procedure is what we are learning right now. Do you understand? So in total audit, you're doing risk assessment procedure and then you're performing other procedures. You understand? This analytical procedure is part of your substantive procedure. Okay, that is why it's called a substantive analytical procedure. That is what is given here, where in analytical procedure, that one of the purpose of analytical procedure is to obtain quality audit evidence when you are performing substantive analytical procedure, and second, to form your overall conclusion at the end. These are the two purpose of analytical procedures. You can write in your notebook, purpose of analytical procedures. Okay, then you have timing of analytical procedures. When do you perform analytical procedure? They say you perform at the planning phase, you can perform at the testing phase, and you can also perform at the completion phase, which means from your planning stage of audit to the testing phase of audit. Testing phase means when you are testing the financial information by obtaining audit evidence, when you're performing those procedures. Then at the completion phase, when you're going to express your opinion. In all the three phases, you can use what procedure? Analytical procedure. So analytical procedure is something which you can use throughout your audit, from your planning stage till your what stage? Till your completion stage. Then Then there's a question, what are the factors to be considered for substantive audit procedure or substantive analytical procedures? Like we learned what are the factors affecting the design of confirmation request. Like we learned the matters affecting the planning of attendance of at the physical inventory counting. Same way, when you have decided to perform analytical procedures, what are the factors which you have considered while taking that decision? See, when you have decided to perform analytical procedures, substantive analytical procedures, what factors were considered while taking such a decision? What factors affected your decision on substantive analytical procedure is the question here. Now, the first point it says is availability of data. What is the first point? Availability of data. What do you mean by availability of data? It means, see, for analytical procedure, what you need data, because only if you get data, that is financial data or non-financial data, you will be able to compare it with the financial information that we have. So data is very important. So what if the data is not relevant and reliable, automatically the analytical procedure also will not be reliable. So the first factor which will help in your decision making on performing substantive analytical procedure is the availability of what? Quality data. Second is disaggregation. What do you mean by disaggregation? Aggregation means coming together. Disaggregation means splitting. So basically the degree to which the data can be what? Put into small pieces. The degree to which the data can be made into small data, that is called as disaggregation. So the more disaggregation possible, the more better will be your what? Analytical procedures. The more the data can be made into different segments, the more better becomes your analytical procedures. Okay, so availability of data, disaggregation. Then is account type. They're saying analytical procedures are more better for income statements, for income, etc., and not for balance sheet items, because income statement comparison is easily possible because income is recorded throughout the year, but balance sheet asset and all is as on a particular date, so comparison is not that easy. Okay, so that is why income statements tend to be more predictable, and there it is accumulated transaction. That is why it is more better to perform analytical procedures on income statement rather than on what? Balance sheet items. It doesn't mean balance sheet you don't do it, but it is more preferable on income statement items, P&L items. Okay, account type. So first factor affecting the substantive analytical procedure was availability of data. Second is disaggregation. Third is account type. Then you have source. They're saying when the transactions are from a source which are which are routine transaction, which happens normally. It's not an unusual transaction, it's a usual transaction. If the source of the transaction is a usual transaction, analytical procedures are more helpful there, because usual transactions will occur every year, so comparison can be done. Okay, but in case of unusual transaction, it is not easy. It is not easy because it doesn't happen every year, so comparison is not easy to understand. Then comes predictability. The more predictable the transaction is, the more easier to perform what? Analytical procedures. The more predictable the transactions are, the more easier to perform analytical procedures. Why? Because the more predictable, you know what to expect, so that expectation can be easily developed. That is why predictability helps you in developing the expectation. That expectation is extremely important when you perform what? Analytical procedure. Then comes nature of assertions. Then comes nature of assertion. What is the nature of assertion? That we learn when I teach you assertion in the next session, that is when I teach you assertion. Last is inherent risk. If you feel analytical procedure, if you feel that there is a high chance of a misstatement, now it is more better to go for a detailed checking rather than on analytical procedure. As you saw that there is in substantive procedure, you have test of details and what? Analytical procedures. If you feel the risk of material misstatement is high, if you feel the chances for a misstatement is high, you go for detailed checking and rather than going for what? Analytical procedures. Do you understand? So these are the factors that is affecting your decision on performing a substantive analytical procedures. One is what? Availability of data. Second is disaggregation. Third is account type. Fourth is source. Fifth one, predictability. Sixth one, nature of assertion. And seventh one, inherent risk or what can go wrong. So this is a very important question which can be asked in the exam. Then next question that could be asked is, what are the techniques available as substantive analytical procedure? What are the techniques available as substantive analytical procedures? Basically, there are four techniques which are available. One is trend analysis, where you try to understand the trend of the current data by comparing the current data with the previous year data. Okay, so previous year what it was and what is the current year. So you know the movement, the trend. That is basically called as trend analysis. You're using the previous balances and trying to find a trend on what could be the balance in the current year. And if you feel there's a huge deviation, you see why the deviation is there. That is trend analysis. Then you have ratio analysis. Here basically what you're doing, you're taking few transactions, finding out ratios, and you clearly know what should be the standard ratio, what could be the ratio, and you compare the ratio that you've got and the standard ratio and see the deviation. That is basically called as ratio analysis, analyzing by using ratios. Here you're analyzing based on trend of the previous year balance with the current year balance. Then you have reasonableness test. Reasonableness test is you're trying to analyze a amount based on the reasonability of that amount. How? Like I said, salary. You can check whether it is reasonable based on the number of employees. And like you have something like hotel rooms hotel income, you can see the number of rooms which have been occupied. So all these things are non-financial data that you are using to analyze. Here you are checking the reasonableness of the transaction. That is why it's called as reasonableness test. Then you have something called as structural modeling. In structural modeling, it's basically a statistical tool. It's a modeling tool where what happens is the prior accounting periods data that you are trying to use the statistical tool and predict what could be the amount in the current year. Now that prediction, then you see what is the prediction and what is the real amount and see the deviation. This is basically called as structural modeling. Okay, so there are four techniques available as analytical procedures, substantive analytical procedures. One, you can perform trend analysis, then you have ratio analysis, then you have reasonableness test, and fourth, you have structural modeling. Okay, then when you are using analytical procedures as a substantive procedure, there are four things which you need to clearly understand. One, you should determine the suitability of the analytical procedure for the given assertion, given transaction. Now we learned there are four techniques. It's not that all the four techniques will be applicable for every kind of transaction. For that purpose, you should check which is the most suitable method, which is the most suitable analytical procedure. You should use that suitable analytical procedure for that particular transaction. So when you are performing analytical procedures, when you're designing and performing substantive analytical procedures, you first check which is the most suitable technique for the particular transaction. Second, you evaluate the reliability of data from which the auditor's expectation is developed. Okay, that means you have to check the data which is being used by the auditor to develop the expectation. Why? Because basically what you're going to do, you are going to compare your expectation with what is the real amount and see the deviation. Now, whatever expectation that you're going to draw, make sure the data that you're using for that expectation is very reliable. Why? If the data goes wrong, your expectation goes wrong and the whole procedure goes wrong. Okay, so you have to evaluate the reliability of data from which the expectation is developed. Then you develop the expectation. You develop an expectation, and that expectation is going to act as the amount which will help you to identify the deviation. See, now what is the standard current ratio that you know? You know the standard current ratio is 2. Now imagine that you perform ratio and you get the answer as 5. Now you know the standard should be 2, but the answer here is 5. So there is a 3-time increase in the current ratio of the entity. You will ask why. You will go for the DV. You'll investigate the matter. Are you getting my point? So that is why it is very important that you develop an expectation of the recorded amount. How much this amount can change? How much amount will be there in the current year? So you need some expectation which need to be developed. And fourth one is you determine the amount of any difference of the recorded amount. Determine the amount of any difference that you can consider to be acceptable without further investigation on it. Means what? See, current ratio standard is 2, but you feel maybe it can go till 2.75. Okay, now till 2.75, the deviation is acceptable for you. Even if the standard is 2, you are still okay with the current ratio being till 2.75. Now, that means till 0.75 increase from the standard, you are not bothered much about investigating it. But imagine that the current ratio which has increased, which should be 2, and you could accept it till 0.75, that is 2.75. But imagine it came till 4. Now that means it is beyond your acceptable expectation also. There you will what investigate why there has been such a, what do you say, such a difference in the current ratio. Do you understand? So these are the four things that you need to consider when you're performing your substantive analytical procedure, when you're using analytical procedure as substantive test. One is the suitability, second is the reliability of data, third is the expectation that you're developing, and fourth is what is the difference that is acceptable to you, where you can go ahead without further what investigation. Okay, rest of the chapter is basically trying to give you the explanations to these 4 points. You can just go through it. Okay, now this is a very good bucket. You can just go through this. Filling the assurance bucket, it is called. This is filling the assurance bucket. That means, as here you see the first procedure is what? Risk assessment procedure. So it's a bucket. So first you will pour which procedure? Risk assessment procedure. So once you perform risk assessment procedure, then you go for what? Other procedures. In other procedures, you are performing test of controls first. So once risk assessment is done, you go for test of controls. So little more assurance. Once risk assessment procedure is done, the assurance bucket starts filling. Once test of control is done, little more filling is done of the bucket. Assurance bucket means auditor is actually auditing to provide what assurance? A reasonable assurance. So first he performs risk assessment, then he performs test of controls, and after that only he performs what? Substantive analytical procedure. After that only he will perform substantive analytical procedure. Do you understand? This is what filling the assurance bucket. That is what is given here also. That is, first you perform risk assessment, then you perform other procedure, then comes another procedure. First comes test of controls, and then only you are performing substantive procedure. In substantive procedure, you may have analytical procedure, that is called as substantive analytical procedure. This bucket is clearly trying to show, first you fill risk assessment, then you do test of controls, and finally you perform substantive analytical procedure where you get a good assurance. You know what assurance is the auditor giving? Reasonable assurance. What assurance? Reasonable assurance. Do you understand? So these 4 points extremely important, extremely important. Learn properly. Okay. So this is the basic discussion on analytical procedure. Analytical procedure. Okay. These points, what is given here, how to determine suitability, how to determine the data, whether the data is reliable, the what do you say, the expectation. All these points are very investigation. This is what I've explained a little bit here and there. You can go through and you'll understand. Okay, so this is essay 520 on analytical procedure. One thing that I left out to tell you is the financial information that we use, to compare with the financial information of the entity. When I said you can use the previous year figures with the current year figures, even you can use the information of a similar industry. That means if you can use the financial information of Airtel to compare with the financial information of Reliance Jio. That is also possible. So it's not that you use the information of the entity only. You can also use the financial information of what? Of the competitor or the similar industry information to analyze the financial information that you are doing, that you are auditing. Do you understand? This is 520 on what? Analytical procedure. And what is it? Analytical procedure. Fine. Okay. So once analytical procedure is done, the 7 methods to obtain audit evidence is done. Next, we have to discuss something called as audit sampling. Okay, you drink some water, take a small rest, just 2 minutes. Okay, drink some water. I'll also come back, have some water. I'll come back. Yes, so I'm back. So the last topic discussion for the day will be audit sampling. Okay, now audit sampling, your chapter number 7 in your textbook. It's very important from the examination perspective. Now, what is audit sampling basically? See, when we do the audit, okay, the number of transactions will be huge. Now, it is not possible for the auditor to audit all the transactions. So basically, he has to select few transactions out of it, perform the procedures on those few transactions, and come to the conclusion for the total transaction. This process of selecting that few transaction out of the total transaction is basically sampling. Okay, so you have an audit population, and from the population you select the sampling units from the population and you make a sample, And whatever procedures that you wanted to perform in audit on that population, now you perform on the sample, and the results that you get from the audit sample will be considered as the result of the population. Okay, so that is basically audit sampling for you. So audit sampling, they're giving you the definition. Okay, it says audit sampling refers to the application of audit procedures to less than 100% of the items from within a population of audit relevance, such that all sampling units have a chance of selection, in order to provide the auditor a reasonable basis on which to draw conclusion about the entire population. So I repeat, it is the application of audit procedure to less than 100% of the items within a population. So there is an audit population which has 100% of the items. Okay, so all the units in the population will be called as, now let me ask you, there's something called as sampling units. What are sampling units? Is it the units within the population or units within the sample only? Are all the units in the population called as sampling units, or the units in this audit sample called as sampling units? Only the units in the audit sample called as sampling units. What do you think? Understand, it's all the units in the population are called as sampling units because it's sampling units, the units that will be used for sampling. Okay, so they're saying that when the audit application of audit procedures, you're going to apply your audit procedures to less than 100% of the items from within a population. So there is a population on which you have to perform audit procedures. Now what you're going to do, you're going to perform audit procedures not on the whole population but less than 100% of the items from within the population of audit relevance, such that all sampling units, that means the whatever units are there within the population, all those sampling units should have an equal chance of selection, so that the auditor will be able to provide a proper conclusion on the entire population. What you wanted to do on the entire population, now you're doing it only on the sample that you select. Okay, that is called as audit sampling. Okay, if you want, you can pause, write, learn and go. Very very important. Okay, definition, very very important. You can pause, write, learn and go. Okay, you can pause, write, learn and go. Audit sampling definition, I told you definition, write it separately and learn. Now what is population? I said pause. Did you pause? I'll give you one more chance to pause. Yeah. Now a population refers to the entire set of data from which the sample is selected and about which the auditor wishes to draw conclusions. Basically, population refers to the entire set of data from which the sample is selected and it from for about which the auditor wishes to draw conclusion. That is called as population. We have something called as characteristics of population and all that. Please go through. Now, approaches to sampling. Now, please listen, my students. This is something very important. Now, usually students do a mistake here. Approaches to sampling. Now, approaches to sampling, what happens is whenever the question is asked, students will be like random sampling, systematic sampling. Sorry, those are not approaches. Those are methods, sample selection methods. I am asking you the approaches to sampling. You understand? Approaches to sampling is basically two types of approaches. Two approaches are there. One is statistical sampling and second is non-statistical sampling. Okay, so approaches, the auditor when he does sampling, he has two approaches. One, he can use statistics when he selects the sample. Now that is statistical sampling. Second, he may not use any statistics or scientific methods. He'll just purely go as per his judgment, his experience. Now that is called as non-statistical sampling. So when the auditor is approaching a sampling in a scientific manner by using probability theory, etc., that is why we call it as a statistical sampling. Second, when the auditor is approaching the sampling without using any scientific method, is called as non-statistical sampling. Okay, so it is clearly beautifully explained here about what is statistical sampling, what is non-statistical sampling. I've given you the meaning. So old syllabus students, please learn it from your practice manual because there it is given properly there, and here new syllabus students can learn from here itself. And basically, the sometimes the question could also be asked regarding the advantages and disadvantages of statistical and non-statistical sampling. It's a very self-explanatory discussion. Okay, statistical sampling, again, you tell me what is it? It's an approach that is random selection of the sample items and the use of probability theory to evaluate sampling results, including measurement of sampling risk. A sampling approach that does not have the above characteristics is considered to be non-statistical sampling. So whatever when you use statistical sampling, it is considered to be more scientific in nature. It is more scientific in nature because here you are using some scientific methods to select the sample. Okay, but in non-statistical sampling, it is more based on the personal experience and knowledge of the auditor. It is based on the common application. It is based on the personal experience and knowledge of the auditor regarding using his judgment. He selects the sample. There is no scientific element there. Okay, so most probably, as statistical sampling is more scientific, it is more or less more accurate. But in non-statistical sampling, there could be bias because it is not scientific. It is based on personal experience and knowledge of the auditor. Okay, so please learn the advantages, disadvantages. Very, very important homework for you. Okay, homework for you. Learn about the advantages and disadvantages of statistical and non-statistical sampling. Okay, now approaches is two approaches. What are two approaches? One is statistical sampling and second is non-statistical sampling. Now let's go to the methods. Now go to the methods. Sample selection methods. See, now sample selection methods are five. One is random sampling. Then you have systematic sampling. Then haphazard sampling. Then you have block sampling. And last one is monetary unit sampling. Okay, there are five sample selection methods. Repeat with me. What is the first one? Yes, random sampling. Second one? Yes, systematic sampling. Third one, I've just changed the order. It is haphazard sampling. Then you have block sampling. And last one is monetary unit sampling. Now, what is random sampling? You might have a thought in your mind. Random sampling means, obviously, I think many of you, your hands would have started moving like this. Yeah, random sampling. No, this is not random sampling. Random sampling is more of a scientific method, which means in random sampling, every sampling unit has an equal chance of being selected. Okay, it is not that you select whatever you feel like, whatever you look at, because there could involve bias. In random sampling, there is no bias involved. There is no bias involved there. Okay, there you are selecting the sample by giving every sampling unit an equal chance of being selected. That is random sampling. In random sampling, there are two types of random sampling. One is simple random sampling and stratified sampling. What is the difference? Simple random sampling means here imagine the population is there and you do random selection on the whole population. You do random selection on the whole population. This lottery. A lottery system is a random selection because you don't know which number is being picked. You cannot be biased there. Okay, that is simple random sampling. Now, what is stratified sampling? Stratified sampling means imagine the population is huge. You cannot apply random selection on the huge population. So, what you do? First, you stratify the population. You break the population into subpopulation or stratas. Then, on each strata, you apply what? Random selection. You apply random sampling. So simple random sampling, you apply the random selection to the total population. Stratified sampling, first you stratify the population, you divide the population. Once you divide the population, then you apply what? Random sampling. That is basically called as stratified sampling. Okay, so first method is random sampling. Then comes what? Systematic sampling. What do you mean by systematic sampling? As the name says, systematic. Here the sample is selected systematically. Okay, imagine you select every fifth transaction, 5, 10, 15, 20. This is a systematic way of selecting the sample. Okay, imagine there are 100 items in the population. You need 5 items as your sample. 100 divided by 5 is 20. Now 20 becomes your interval. So every 20th transaction you select. When you reach 100, you'll have 5 transactions with you. Now this is basically called as systematic sampling or interval sampling. Here there's an interval that you have to select. The interval may be mathematically selected or picked up according to your wish. But you have an interval here. Your selection is based on intervals. That is why it is called as systematic sampling. Then you have something called as block sample. Sorry, haphazard sampling. What is haphazard sampling? Haphazard. The way by which you pronounce it itself, you have haphazard. The one that you thought is random, that is, you just pick up by just looking into according to your wish, is basically haphazard. Haphazard means something you do without any kind of a rule or a system. You just do it in the way you like. No, you could be biased, you could be influenced there. That is called as haphazard sampling. There is no specific way of doing it. You select whatever you want. That is haphazard. Okay, so random sampling, there is random number tables. There is a scientific way of doing. Every sampling unit is given an equal chance of selection. In haphazard sampling, there is a chance that the person could be biased because he's selecting what he likes, what he wants. Okay, so random sampling, systematic sampling, haphazard sampling. Then comes block sampling. What is block sampling? What is block sampling? I'm sure mostly you would have got the answer in your mind that first we divide the total population into blocks and we select the sample from the blocks. Now, if that is the answer that has come to your mind, my student, that is stratified sampling. No, that is not block sampling. Block sampling, what is happening is the whole block becomes a sample. Here, the block is a sample. Imagine there are 100 items. I need some 10 items into my audit sample. Now I start from item number 30 and I have decided to take one single block. So my first item is 30. From that I start 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39. 39 is my 10th item. Now 30 to 39 becomes my block and that is my sample. So here the block itself becomes my sample. Here I can go for two blocks also because I need total 10. I can go two blocks. How? 10 divided by 2, 5 in a block. So I start from 30, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34. 30, 31, 32, 33, 34. This 5 becomes my one block. Then I go to 72, item number 72, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76. This becomes my second block. Here also I get 10 items. But I have two blocks of 5 items. This is called as block sampling. The whole block becomes the sample. Okay, the block itself is my sample. Okay, and the last one is monetary unit sampling. Now the name itself says monetary unit sampling. Here you select the sample by giving weight to the monetary unit, or it is called as value weighted selection. So you're giving weights to values. Imagine there are 100 transactions. I need to select 10 transactions. I need 10 transactions as my sample. First I select transaction whose value is 5,000 rupees. Imagine I get two transactions. Then I select transaction whose value is 4,000 rupees. I get seven transactions. Then I select transaction whose value is 3,000 rupees. I get some one or two transactions. So I get total 10. Now here you can see I have given weight to the values. So the focus is on giving weight to the value. It's a value weighted selection. That is why it is called as monetary unit sampling. You're giving value to the weight. Sorry, you're giving weight to the values, monetary amount. Okay, so these are the 5 methods of sample selection. What are the sample selection methods? Random sampling, systematic sampling, haphazard sampling, block sampling, monetary unit sampling. 5 sample selection methods. Okay, sample selection methods. Then there's something called a sampling risk to learn, but we cannot learn this unless and until we learn risk assessment. So when the revision lecture of risk assessment is done, I'll be teaching you about sampling risk also. Okay, so this is majorly discussion of audit sampling that you need right now based on what is given in the textbook. Okay, regarding the risk part and regarding the sample size part, all these things we can learn once the risk area is completed. So we'll finish the risk area in the coming sessions. Somewhere we'll be learning the risk area. Once we finish the risk area, we'll be learning about the sampling risk in this chapter. Okay, right now for the time being, you learn all these points. First, what is audit sampling? Learn about population, learn the approaches to sampling, and also learn the sample selection methods. Okay, yeah, the other two questions on sampling risk and also the size of the sample, we can see that once we finish the risk part. then only you will understand those topics better. Okay, I think my risk lecture comes a little later. The fourth or fifth lecture is the audit risk lecture. So in that I will be dealing with risk, then understanding these topics will be easier. Okay, so now two topics we have dealt. One is analytical procedures and few parts of audit sampling. Okay, please revise properly. Okay, learn really well. Understand, say we as faculties are doing everything possible for the students to pass the examination. Okay, conducting lectures, correct? So all those things that we do is because we want you to clear the examination. You're worried about not attending classes, we are giving you free revision lectures. Okay, and it is very difficult, it's not easy to talk without students in front of you, like recording these lectures, it's not easy. So when we are doing it for your benefit, I want you to study really well, and you can do it. You can do it, even failure is something which, see, when you write an exam, when you do something, somebody, there is a pass, there's a positive thing and a negative thing. Don't think about failure, just focus on studies right now. Okay, just focus on studies right now. Make sure that you complete everything properly, because everything is uncertain right now, so you need to use the time in the best possible manner. So have the fire in you, learn really hard, learn really well. Okay, when I know a lot of faculties who are working really hard to get the classes to the students. Okay, so you have to work really hard, push really hard, and make sure that you are able to complete the portions properly. Okay, okay, whatever I have promised you in these revision lectures, I'll complete all those portions, but that is very limited, you have to study. I've also announced test paper, so don't forget, we'll be doing test paper tomorrow after 25th afternoon 2 o'clock. The test paper will be uploaded in Leksha's website. Take the test paper, write the answers and keep, we'll discuss it. Okay, writing is also very very important. Okay, one of these lectures I'll try to come live also, so as I'll be able to talk to you a little more things. Right now you go through these lectures, study really well. Okay, okay, so thank you so much. So this is your part 2 of the day 2 revision lecture. Okay, so I'll meet you after 2 days. I think this is 24th. Now, next lecture comes on 26th. 26th, I think we are dealing with audit report and certain standards on audit report, which is very, very, very important. Okay, so that's very, 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 very important. It's a very good session on audit reports that we have to discuss. So, this two things, sessions that you have got, learn it really well. It's little topics, there are more topics to learn, so just make sure that you are finishing it on time. Okay, so thank you so much, thank you so much. So yeah, so take care, study well, stay home and be safe. Okay.